Let's now move on to our third main topic today. And our third main topic today comes to us from Josh Sosa, who writes, "Hey John, big fan of the show." Thank you so much, Josh. "Ever since Fox was acquired by Disney, I'm always hearing people excited for a next big X-Men film in the MCU. However, something that you said that I love is that Kevin Feige doesn't rush anything. Could it be possible that following the Avengers formula, there could be a couple of solo X-Men films, such as Cyclops, Storm, Rogue, etc., before the big team-up film to both build up the team-up film and avoid depending on Wolverine for success?" All right, thanks a lot for that question, Josh. And you're right. I mean, what a lot of people lose focus of, Disney buying Fox was never about X-Men. It was never about Fantastic Four. That is a distant afterthought. Them, it was about acquiring library and acquiring massive amounts of IP that they can then turn and leverage for their Disney Plus service, and then have some fringe benefits as well, like getting the X-Men. That's great, and all that kind of stuff. But what a lot of film fans have clearly and obviously been focused on is, when are we getting the X-Men movies? And then the question comes up, well, how do you do the X-Men films? There's been this growing feeling that I've always rejected, that, you know, DC would have been more successful if they started with individual films and then did a team-up movie. I reject that logic. I do. I think they could have started the DCU with a Justice League movie and been completely successful. The problem wasn't that they didn't follow a certain formula. The problem was they didn't make crowd-pleasing movies. That's been their Achilles heel. That's changing, but that's the problem they historically had. Had nothing to do about whether they started with solo movie. They did start with a solo movie. It was called Man of Steel. And people didn't appreciate it for the masterpiece that it is, damn it. Anyway, I won't go off on that whole thing again. But the thing to me is it's not a formula. You didn't need, I say this all the time, for Star Wars, George Lucas didn't need to make a standalone Han Solo movie, then a standalone Luke Skywalker movie, then a standalone Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, then a standalone Princess Leia movie, and then you do Star Wars. When James Gunn made Guardians of the Galaxy, he didn't need to make a standalone Star-Lord movie, and a standalone Gamora movie, and a standalone Drax movie, and a standalone Rock movie, and then bring them together for that. They didn't need to do any of that. For Star Trek, they didn't need to do the solo stories of Lieutenant James Kirk and of then a solo thing of Spock and then a solo thing of Bones. No, they just made Star Trek. There you go. Go. Boom. And I think X-Men need to be treated the same way. I don't think you need to follow the Avengers formula in order for X-Men to be successful. They did X-Men. It was the most successful comic book movie of all time for a while. Then turned out X-Men 2, which I thought was the greatest comic book movie of all time for quite a while before it got replaced, and it's been replaced a few times since then. But I really don't see there being any need at all for them to launch solo films. That being said, I jumped on my social media last night, Rob, and I asked people, hey, do you guys have a thought on this about whether they should do X-Men first as a team-up movie, do solo movies first? Do you guys have some insight and thought? I got over 600 messages from people yesterday on my social media. And within those messages, let me be clear here, I am firmly of the belief that you do X-Men straight out of the gate as the X-Men. You don't need standalone solo movies. That is my position on this, always has been. But gleaning from the messages that I got from a bunch of people yesterday, I did find what I believe to be a couple of valid reasons if you wanted to go the solo movie first before getting to a team-up movie. I found some pretty decent arguments being made by some people who were responding to me. Let me go over three of them that I thought were kind of made sense. Why should you go with X-Men solo films first? Well, number one, it gives you an opportunity to give a deeper introduction to lesser known characters. Look, not a lot of people know who Rogue is, not a lot of people, whatever. And you can make an argument that if you just introduce Rogue in a team-up movie, you're not going to have time to really get to know who that character is in any sort of depth. Okay, that makes sense. And it gives you the opportunity to take like a Nightcrawler or a Beast or, I don't know, Havoc or whoever. Get the audience more familiar with them before you bring them in. I don't know that that's necessary, but it's a good point. It does give you that opportunity if you go the solo route first. A second decent argument, I think, is it gives the MCU team, like the team at MCU, Kevin Feige and his guys, more time to flesh out the new world that includes mutants. One of the biggest hurdles I've seen that this X-Men thing coming into the MCU is going to present is, how do you explain your world? How do you retcon your entire world? Mutants have been around for a long time and have been a major part of the political landscape in X-Men mythology for a long time. How do you recreate that world? And if you did do a couple of solo movies first, that does give the creative team at Marvel a longer period of time to flesh that world out. I acknowledge that's not a bad argument. The third one is this as well. It gives the opportunity to completely reset the X-Men origin stories with new versions of the Charles and Eric story. You can just say, you know what, mutation is now a new thing. And we've got these new characters, Charles and Eric, two mutants that now find they're mutants. They have these powers that are incredible, but they have two different philosophies about how mutants interact with the world, and it gives you the opportunity to restart the story. Again, I'm not saying that's what I would do, but it is a pretty good argument. So you look at arguments like giving introduction to lesser-known characters, giving the creative team at the MCU more time to flesh out the world, and gives you the opportunity to kind of reset a new thing by starting with a, Eric movie, just a movie called Eric, just following Eric Legend, Charles following him, and then kind of resetting the world. It gives you those opportunities. Again, not something that I would do, but I could see the argument of somebody doing that. Rob, let me pose the question to you in two different ways. Number one, do you think X-Men should start with an X-Men movie? Whenever it does happen, and it's not going to happen for years, but when they do, should they start with an X-Men film or should they start with solo things? And what are some maybe decent thoughts or decent arguments you think that would support the idea of maybe doing solo films first?
Well, first of all, I love the X-Men. They're like what Star Trek is to me on television. The X-Men are to me in the comic books. I love the X-Men. I would posit that there are already mutants in the MCU. We just haven't seen them yet. We've seen two. We've seen Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. They're called miracles. They haven't been identified as mutants yet because no one really knows they're there. The way we're seeing the world through S.H.I.E.L.D. and through the Avengers, they just haven't crossed paths. The X-Men have not emerged on the public in the public arena yet. So Storm in the comics was married to Black Panther. Why not introduce Storm? You could in a solo movie and have her cross over with Black Panther. I think that there's a lot of ways there's a lot of arguments to be made for a solo Wolverine movie. We haven't seen Wolverine emerge yet. We don't know the Canadian super team Alpha Flight, which Wolverine was a part of. There's ways you could introduce these characters and lead up to the X-Men and again, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch were a big part of the X-Men lore and mythology over the course of both the Avengers and the X-Men comic runs. So it could be done. I think having maybe one solo movie and introduce a marquee character that way, whether, like you said, whether it's Eric, because Magneto is, of course, the father of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Maybe that's what it's about. Maybe Scarlet Witch goes looking for her father. Who knows? And finds him. And that's the way we get the new version of Magneto. There's ways it can be done, but I think a solo film wouldn't be a bad way. But like you, John, I think introducing an X-Men, we already saw how the X-Men were introduced as a team in 2000. It worked great. But using the threads that already exist in the MCU to build up to it could be really great as well. And maybe have one solo movie that leads into a larger movie. And, you have Scarlet Witch leave the Avengers and become an X-Man. I don't know.
One thing I don't think they're going to do, I don't think they're going to retcon Scarlet Witch or Quicksilver if and when he ever comes back.
It's just they weren't recognized as mutants yet.
Well, but they got their powers from their experimentation with the Infinity Stone because of the experiments. That's how they made them out of there, and their parents had different backstories. I don't think they're going to connect.
That's how they think they made them.
I know. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to leave Wanda as she is in the movies. I don't think they're going to suddenly say she's a mutant. I don't think they're going to go that route. I don't think suddenly they're going to say whatever this new Eric character is going to be her father. I don't think they're going to do that either. But there is no limit on what the potential is of what they could do. I mean, those are certainly things that'll be available to them if they wanted to do it. The question here, guys, is what do you think that Marvel should do with the X-Men? Do you think when they're ready to bring them into the MCU, should they bring them in an X-Men movie right out of the gate? Do you think they should probably go some solo films first? Let us know what you guys think. Jump down in the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.